want to welcome everybody. We are here with Hope Darst, and
Yay!
We are so excited. We've known each other for quite a while, and so we went to church for a little while together, and then somebody the other day said, "Oh, I love the song that's blowing up the radio," and I was like, I know her. Wait a minute.
Wait, and we know that song too. We're like, this is so cool.
I know. It's so fun to be able to do this with people that I know.
Yeah. Well, we get to interview so many amazing people, and it's just always a pleasure when we get to introduce people who are the real deal. And we sat in the audience and watched you lead worship and experience the anointing, and then listening to your album. Thanks. You had me in tears this morning.
Yes.
I mean, it's had me in tears. I
think I'm going to sing my way through. And he was
just such faith statements and such a great place of victory and joy and hope.
Thank you.
And a lot of people will say their album's got a lot of hope in it, but then it's kind of sad. And yours was, I was like, yes! Let's storm the gates of hell and take things for Jesus.
That was such a goal. That was like such a personal goal for me to write a record that was incredibly vulnerable and incredibly honest about the journey of disappointments and failures and setbacks and all of the things in between, but that every single one of these songs ended at the place of the hope that Jesus brought in every single one of those seasons. Because without it, it just ends up being a sad biography. You know what I mean? Like, you're like, okay, cool. It was, and honestly, like, these were songs, like, thank you for saying that about Sing My Way Through. I think if there's a statement of the record, that really is the statement of the record. We almost titled it that. But it's because all of these songs were written in seasons that I actually had to write what I had to sing in order to get through that season and to actually move from places of fear and disappointment or insecurity or whatever it was, and actually move into what is the promise of God and the inheritance of God's word. And so it means a lot to me that I can now hand them off to people, and hopefully they get to actually do what I had to do. And these songs can be songs that sing them through the season that they're in, and that they're full of authority and confessions and declarations and faith that shift something. I mean, that's the whole point, right? Like, especially as worship leaders, like that's what our desire is. Not just to, I've said several times, I didn't want to write a record that you just walked away like, man, that was pretty. Like, or I just offered you a song. I actually wanted to offer people a weapon of worship for their life to actually deal with, to do battle with, or to allow them to be vulnerable with, and to feel safe with Jesus, and to allow him into deep places of pain and grief or loss, and there be real healing and freedom, and what we experience as believers, both in our private moments with the Lord and in our corporate moments as congregations. And so that was the hope for this record. So thank you so much.
Well, I would say you succeeded.
Oh, man.
I certainly would encourage everybody, go check it out. It just came out this week. And Today. We're with you on the day.
On the release day.
It's crazy.
It's pretty wild.
I know.
Well, tell people a little bit about your story, because you're not new to worship, but it's definitely not been the traditional path to being like #1 record. You led for Women of Faith, right?
Yes, I did, back several years ago. You're right, I don't have the most traditional story. I mean, we've been joking all along the way of this journey of just like, who signs their first record deal at 39 and puts out their first record? Like,
cool.
You know, it's actually just such a beautiful picture that like God's plan is really best, and that if you're willing to surrender to that it really does happen the way it should happen, being that it actually gives him the most glory, and that he gets to actually be the one that's the star of this story. Because there was so many years that I attempted to do this twice, actually, in my life, that I attempted to pursue, like being an artist or making a career of music, and the Lord was like, "No, ma'am, like that's not what I'm asking you to do."
It's so hard, though. Like,
I mean, the first time was like a death. Like, it felt like just actually like the death of a dream, and I was grieving. I was 25, newly married. And I was like, okay, now is go time, right? And the Lord was like, no.
And if it doesn't happen now, it's not going to happen.
Yeah, exactly. And I just felt in that season so strongly that the Lord was like, I need you to be willing to bury that dream and trust me with your life. I have something different for you. And that's ultimately what called me into full-time ministry. Like, I ended up making this massive redirection and going in to full-time ministry, on staff at a church, leading worship, helping pastor people, running the department, doing the set list, running, sending out all the invites for rehearsals and printing choir lyrics and, just all, like doing all the things and helping love on people in the seasons of life that they were in. And but I mean, I was also very young and inexperienced and made lots and lots and lots of mistakes.
As we all do.
That season. And so, when I made that massive kind of redirection, God allowed that really became what I thought I would do for the rest of my life. Like just be in the local church, only lead worship. I wasn't dreaming about making records at that point. That really wasn't the goal. And fast forward, like 13 years later, I'm raising a family. My husband and I are just in the trenches of real life, right? And I was 33, it's back in like 2013, and I was traveling with Women of Faith. I had just had my second daughter. I'm on staff at a church. So I'm just, leading all over the place what it felt like. And so, the natural thing was, I should make like a record and take it on the road. Like there was nothing.
Have a little booth.
Have a little, just offer people some songs. And went into the studio, recorded 8 songs. We were 8 songs into the project. And that same voice started speaking again. And was like, hey, you might want to check in with me.
Oh, wow.
And I remember feeling like the Lord just saying, like, you can do this. I'm not telling you you can't, but this isn't my plan.
Wow.
This is your plan, and I love you regardless of what you choose, but it's not mine. And if you'll trust me and you'll set this record aside and you don't release it, I promise you that in the future, I'm going to make sense of the surrender.
Wow.
And that was really all that God's really spoke to me.
That's
that
such
season.
a good line. Can you say that again?
Oh, I don't even know if I'll remember.
I'll make sense of the surrender.
I'll make sense of the surrender. Yeah. And that one was probably it was harder in one way because there was so much invested into it.
Money.
We'd spent money and
Lots
time
of money.
and energy. But that same year, simultaneously, had at the top of that year, I'd pretty much had like just a full-on just breakdown of the stress of managing life with babies. I had postpartum depression. My family had gone through a really, really difficult season. My parents had just, their marriage ended. It was a lot that was kind of circling, and I was just running on fumes. Yeah. And at the top of that same year, I had a radical encounter with the Lord, kind of on the heels of just falling apart and being like, I'm done. Like, I don't know how to do this. And and I remember just saying to the Lord, like, I've served you, I've loved you, I've obeyed you, I've done everything you've asked, and this isn't working. Like, I'm not free. I'm riddled with insecurity and worry and stress and fear and all these kinds of, and like, this doesn't feel like abundant life. This doesn't feel like what you said you came to give me. And I just remember just being like, does this even work? Like, I'm doing all the things. I'm going to all the Bible studies and I'm doing all the serving and I'm doing. I was basically a professional Christian. Like, I knew how to do Christianity really, really well. Yeah. I didn't know how to do intimacy with the Father. Wow. And that year became a year of such intimate healing and such deep, deep work with the Holy Spirit. Wow. And God just setting me free from years and years of patterns of just chains of my mind and my heart. And I was experiencing deep healing with Jesus. Wow. And so when it came time to release that project, so much had happened. My ability to hear the voice of God, my ability to be tender to what he was asking was so heightened that I couldn't do this record. And so I remember just being like, okay, God, like, if your presence isn't in it, then I don't want it. No. And I had a choice. Like, I had to either choose the presence of God or the passion of my heart. And I just was like, what is it worth? It will cost me everything to release this if you're not in it. It was very much like a Moses moment of like, I don't want to go if your presence is going with me. And so I shelved that sucker, much to my husband's dismay. He was like, how much money did this? Like, we were literally talking about this last night. He's like, I just remember being like, okay, Lord, but could she at least like just throw it up on iTunes? Yeah. Like, we just make a little money back.
We do one single? Can we do something?
But he was amazing because he honestly said, he's like, I know you. He's like, you wouldn't shelf this if this wasn't God. Like, this has been something. And so the next 7 years of my life was just serving and loving my family. I came off staff. I stopped traveling. I just plugged in to being a full-time mom, staying at home, allowing God to just do deep healing over and over and over, and getting super involved with our church, the Belonging Company. And it was through them that the journey of songwriting started. And all of a sudden I was getting to lead worship again, which I honestly didn't know if that would ever happen. Like I was really good with, I may not ever do that again, and that's okay. Like, but if I can raise my family well, if I can have a healthy marriage, if I can have a healthy heart with Jesus, like then that's all that matters. So when God began to open these doors little by little, they just felt like these massive presents, like under the Christmas tree that I wasn't expecting, right?
Well,
You're
especially
like,
at a church like the Belonging, where you've got some of the who's who of worship leaders. And
yes,
you're like,
some of my heroes of faith and heroes of just legends that had led me in worship and had honestly impacted my life through their songs. And what I've found is that even up close, they're even more heroes than I could have even imagined because of who they are and how they live their lives truly behind the scenes. When you're not seeing, there's a reason that there's weight to what they do. It's because of what they've done in private with the Lord. And so when we wrote Peace Be Still a couple of years ago, I would have never dreamed we'd be sitting here today, because we wrote that song because I was dealing with fear. Mia was dealing with disappointment. We were just honestly trying to address the issue that was going on in our life. And because we're worship leaders, we were like, well, then let's write a song that we can sing over our own lives to get us through this moment. We weren't thinking about 4 years later putting out a record. I wasn't an artist. I wasn't even really a songwriter.
Will Caleb play this?
No. We were just like, I'm literally drowning in fear, and you're fighting disappointment. Well, let's grab a hold of a promise of God and literally sing our way through this. And that's what we did in the room that day. We were literally singing our way through fear and disappointment to a place of faith and trust. And we had no idea what God was going to do with that song when our church released it and Lauren sang it.
Yeah, so talk about, because your church released it, Lauren Daigle sings it, it blew up huge.
It was massive. I mean, I'll never forget the first time that we led it. I was at church, and we were having like a conference that week just for like our church, and so we were all leading songs. I was leading it, someone else was leading it, Lauren was leading it. That's just kind of how we do it. We all just lead all the songs. And the night that she led it was the first night that I could sit and watch it actually happen. Like, be someone who could receive from the song. Because I'd always been leading it or just singing it over myself in my car, in my house. And I remember standing in the back of the room, and I just began to weep. Because I could see people were singing this song like the way that I had been singing this song in my own heart and in my own life, and you could feel like the ability for fear to suddenly like start drowning in the promise of God's peace, and that faith was rising literally in the room. And it just became an anthem for our church, an anthem for our house. And once we released it, the church released it and Lauren sang it, and we watched that song just impact so many lives. In my mind, it was like, good, it's done. It's done what it's supposed to do. I'm moving on. I'm doing carpool, and I'm serving at church on the weekends and loving my friend. Like, I wasn't thinking that this was going to turn into what it has turned into. And so fast forward several years, that's all I'm doing. I'm raising my family. I'm serving my church. I lead worship. I'm writing songs. Like, the passion to write songs for the church really grew in my heart. Because prior to that, I'd only done it here and there. It wasn't something that was like a big part of my journey. But becoming a part of this community of people, they just so lovingly pulled me in and just said, I just think there's more to you than just leading on a Sunday. And anyone who's ever been to our church or seen me lead live, like I tend to lead very spontaneously, and so a lot of the things that are on this record are moments that were spontaneous, that would kind of happen, and I would then eventually turn into songs. And so that just started happening, and the journey of writing just kept going and going and going and going. And I kind of found myself just about 2 years ago going, God, all of a sudden I just have like all these songs. I don't know what to do with them. And there wasn't like this big grandiose plan in my mind. And it was such an unexpected journey that I found myself in, especially later in life, And I just remember being like, God, I don't want to be a bad steward of this. Like, I actually want to be faithful with this. Like, what are you asking of me? And truthfully, I just thought like, oh, well, maybe I'll go like pursue a publishing deal. Like, I really love this. This is such a passion now. Like, what a sweet gift that God's given me in kind of the second half of my life to be able to write songs for the church.
It'll work with my schedule.
Yes, honestly, like, oh my gosh, I can write from like 9 to 2 and then still do carpool and get my kids home. Like, it was a dream. Like, just such a dream thing that God kind of brought into my life. But this song, Peace Be Still, it just kept coming back. Like, in various ways, it would just keep, we started calling it the boomerang song because there were several different people along the way that were possibly going to cut that song and release it, send it to radio, and it just never happened. And Mia Fields, she said, it's the boomerang song. She's like, you keep throwing it away, and God keeps bringing it back to you. And she's like, eventually, when are you going to like actually pick it up and carry it? And I was like, what do you mean?
What are you
like,
talking about?
That just seems so foreign. And so it was a journey for me to get to the place of faith to actually step out and go, okay, I'm going to record the song.
Wow.
And honestly, it was just let's record it and let's just see if there's any anointing on it. Because honestly, I was like, there's no point in releasing this thing if the presence of God and the power of God isn't on it. I just don't have any interest. So like my greatest like concern was, Jesus, I just want your presence on it. Like, and so when it got recorded and we began to share it with people, they were having the same reaction that so many people had to that song live through the record. And so God just began to open doors that we weren't even knocking on. And fast forward, here we are a year and a half later. And so many of those little songs that were in that basket, like honestly, God just multiplied. Like I felt so much like that moment where you're like, I only have 5 fish and 2 loaves of bread. Like I don't have much to bring, God, but if this is you, then like multiply it because I need to know that it's you. I don't have this desire to prove something. I just want to be obedient. I just want to do what you're asking me. And so I really didn't expect it was going to be this at this point in life, especially after twice God being like, no. The yes was so unexpected. It was not true to like how the story had gone for so long. And so I just sit here just so humbled and so grateful and overwhelmed and honestly just hoping that these songs actually just minister to people and that they really do carry the hope of Jesus because that's, at the end of the day, that's all I want is that people would encounter God when they hear this record and that they would feel the presence of God come into their hearts, come into their lives, and they would have these moments of healing and revelation and truths that would undo and unlock lies and chains that have been wrapped around their minds or their hearts for decades or years or whatever it is. And at the end of the day, they'll just know like they can trust him. It is really good.
So talk to us about your dreams coming to pass so much later, because I know a lot of worship leaders are out there, or even young worship leaders who have in their heart, hey, I want to do this, but there's people that seem like they're in front of them or it's not coming to pass. Because
people that even just want to lead worship.
At their local church.
And they're just like, am I ever going to get to lead worship?
Because so many people, especially living here in Nashville, are trying so hard to get the record deal. And once they have it, they are doing everything they possibly can to get on radio. You don't seem like you really care.
Don't tell my label.
And then it's blowing up. And so, I mean, it's God. God giving the glory.
Breathing on it.
But talk about that process, because I think it will help a lot of people.
I think I can relate to that. Like, I had many years, like, when I was younger, of that same feeling of, like, God, like, why does it feel like everyone's just going past me? Like, there was one point in my life in my 20s where I had 3 roommates that have all gone on to win Grammys. And I remember, like, earlier on being like, oh, like, am I worse than I think I am? Like, maybe I'm not that, like, gifted at this, or maybe I'm just, like, it's a pipe dream. Like, there were moments of that, of feeling like getting left behind or not seen or whatever. And I think at the end of the day, that actually is the issue that has to be addressed the most. Because if you are pursuing this from the place of, I need validation, I need to be seen, I need God to make good on this so that I can feel good about who I am, it will end you up in a real pit. You know, it talks about the fear of man as like a pit, and it snares you into it. And I think that that's what that can do. That need to be seen, that need to want man to approve of what you're doing.
Have their stamp of like.
Have your stamp of approval. You know, it's that all those marking points are, I did it. I did a good job. Yeah. And people like me and God's pleased with me. And this is proof that God was in all of this. I didn't have that story. Yeah. And I had to actually figure out, what does it look like if God's plan is for me to not be seen and to be hidden? Is that still success? Is that still actually God's best? And that was a wrestle for me early on. But I quickly realized that a hidden life very much looks like Jesus's. He was hidden for 33 years. And then his ministry was 3 years and literally changed the course of history. Yeah. And I think we, in our culture, tend to think, be seen, be seen, be seen, be seen. Yeah. And Jesus goes, be hidden, be hidden, be hidden in me. Get in the vine. And when you're in the vine, fruit can be produced. Yeah. And the thing that I love about fruit is that fruit is meant for others to eat of. If you're not in the vine, you'll never produce a fruit that's for anyone else but yourself. Wow. And I think so often we're so busy of wanting the fruit for ourselves that we're not concerned about, am I actually building a life where I'll have fruit that others can eat of? And for those people that are in your churches and you're wanting to be seen, like, all I can say is do what God puts in front of you. So if the season that you're in, that door hasn't opened, then go be faithful where you are. If that means you are being faithful to serve in the kids ministry, if you are being faithful to just be on time at your job, if you're being faithful to like pay your bills on time, like tithe faithfully, like I'm telling, those are the seeds that you have to be planting in your life in order for there to actually be a fruit later on in whatever it is that God has called you to. And what ends up happening in that is, much like I thought I was going to be a professional singer my whole life, and then God is like, no, actually I want you to go be a worship leader and be on staff at a church and serve people. Like, if I had not been willing to see where God was actually moving in my life, I would have missed that. And I think God is way more excited about promoting humility and obedience than he is about promoting gifts. You know what I mean? Talent, if you're trying to have your talent sustain you and make you known, then you will have to sustain that. But if you actually surrender and you're like, okay, God, whatever you're asking me to do, I'll go do that, because he'll sustain it and his footprints will be all over it, right? And you won't have to work hard. Do you know what I mean? Like, I love the fact that it says, you know, my yoke is easy and my burden is light. It doesn't mean that you don't work. There's things that you have to do, but the burden should be light and the yoke should be easy, because he's actually the one doing the work for your behalf. So I don't know if that makes sense, but that's what I would say to a lot of people, to not get caught up in needing to be seen and being okay with being hidden. God does a lot of beautiful work in the hidden years to have fruit.
Well, it builds such a maturity to where, like, now that you're able to step forward, you know what the anointing is. You know how to serve people. It's not an album about yourself. And do you feel that, like, when you are now, like, obviously you're growing, everybody's growing as a person, but...
Oh, yes.
Like, would you have been able to handle this when you were...
No, not at all. You know, I would have done it all, like what I said before. I would have done it all for me. I would have done it all for my own validation. I would have done it all to prove I was good enough and that God really did call me to this. And see, like, like, that's what it would have been. Where now all I can think about is, oh my gosh, Jesus. Oh my gosh, Jesus. Like, look what you've done. Look at the story I get to tell of you. Oh, I hope people hear who you are. I hope people sense how good you are in these songs. I hope that the authority that you've given us permeates through these songs. It's just, it's awesome. It became such a all about me to it's all about you. And I hope that I get to hand it off to people and they can see and feel that as well. And I wouldn't have done that when I was 20 or even 30.
Right. Truth be told.
So I gotta ask, what do your kids think about turning on the radio and hearing Mom?
That's cool to them. I think most of it they think is dumb. They're just like, whatever. Or like, oh, Mom, don't play that song again. We're so sick of it. But there's little moments where they'll be like, let's just turn the radio on and see if your song's on there. And that's like, so cute. And they're really sweet. It's changed kind of the system of our life, if that makes the rhythm, I should say the rhythm of our life, because I've been a stay-at-home mom, and so to suddenly go back to work, and especially in the middle of COVID, where they're home and they see all the work that I'm doing, that's been challenging for us as a family to figure out what is this rhythm of life going to look like, and we're really open with them and talk about like, this is a lot of change, but we don't ever want it to be at the cost of our family, and so we're going to be checking in all the time and checking in with the girls, but every time we ask them like, how are you feeling, they're like, we're just excited, Mom. You get to do something you've always wanted to do, and it's really cool. And so I hope that, it helps them understand, like, there's no expiration date on what God's written on our lives. Like, if He's written it on your life, it will happen. Don't get caught up in the when and the how and the where. Just be caught up in Him. Like, just be caught up in His presence. And I swear the wind of that presence, it will move you to where you're meant to be at the right moment and the right time. So hopefully my story and my life just is an example of that.
That's amazing.
I think it is.
We have at least one question that we've been asking everybody.
Okay.
That we'll just have you rearrange and have you do it by yourself.
Okay.
Is biggest worship fail?
Oh, gosh. I have too many.
That's almost everybody.
A lot of people say that.
Okay, do you want to know what? Okay, this is going back a minute. So, Planet Shakers, which our pastor Henry Seeley was part of for many, many years, they had this big song called Healer. And this was like right the same year that Henry and Alex Seeley had moved here, and I was leading worship at my church, my home church at the time, and Healer was on the set list. And Henry's who sang it on the Planet Shakers record, I'm pretty sure. And so he walks in while I see him walk in.
And you recognize him?
I recognize him, and I wreck the song.
Oh, no.
Like, lose all sense of where I'm at. I don't I sing the lyrics wrong. I like the band, like, I try to go to another section. The band doesn't go with me, because I'm like, just, all of a sudden, I was just in this moment of like, oh my gosh, like, Henry Seeley's here, and he wrote the song, and now I feel really weird. Like, I don't know what to do. And it was just such a fail moment of like getting wrapped up in that and not being like, hey Jesus, this is about you. Like, it was such a fail on like epic proportions, fail of the heart, fail of the logistics, fail of like just all of it. But yeah, I have unfortunately many
then he becomes your pastor, and then he invites you into the writing.
It's true. It's crazy. So yeah, that was one of my more shining moments.